Think of the 80s. Neon lights, mixtapes, and high school hallways filled with drama and dreams. Now think of the movies that defined that era. The Breakfast Club, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, 16 Candles. Behind all of them was one man, John Hughes. He wasn't just a director or a screenwriter. He was the voice of a generation. But while his movies shaped Hollywood, Hughes himself vanished from it. This is the untold story of John Hughes, the rise, the retreat, and the legacy that still echoes today.
John Hughes didn't start in Hollywood. In fact, he came from the world of advertising. Writing slogans, copy lines, and jingles, he learned how to speak directly to people's emotions. That ability would later make his movies so powerful. In the late 70s, Hughes found himself writing short stories for the National Lampoon magazine, where his sharp wit and observational humor stood out. One of his pieces, Vacation 58, was so successful that it inspired the movie National Lampoon's Vacation, which he wrote the screenplay for. That was his doorway into Hollywood. But Hughes wasn't satisfied with just writing scripts. He wanted to tell stories his way. Stories that reflected real teens, not the fake, glossy versions Hollywood was used to showing. And in 1984, with 16 Candles, he did exactly that, launching a new era in American cinema.
With 16 Candles in 1984, John Hughes officially arrived. It wasn't just another teen comedy. It was authentic. It was awkward. It was funny in a way that felt real. And at the heart of it was Molly Ringwald, who became Hughes's muse and one of the defining faces of the 1980s. Hollywood quickly realized Hughes had tapped into something no one else had, the ability to capture the teenage experience with honesty. Unlike other films of the time that exaggerated or mocked teen life, Hughes understood the small details, the unspoken crush, the lunchroom anxiety, the feeling of being invisible at home. Then came The Breakfast Club in 1985, a film shot almost entirely in one location, a high school library, with just 5 characters. No special effects, no massive budget, just raw, emotional storytelling. Each character was a stereotype on the surface: the jock, the princess, the brain, the basket case, the criminal. But Hughes peeled back the layers, showing audiences that people are always more complicated than the labels they're given. That movie didn't just resonate with teenagers, it resonated with parents, teachers, and anyone who had ever felt misunderstood. By 1986, Hughes was unstoppable. Ferris Bueller's Day Off became a cultural phenomenon. The story of a teenager skipping school with style was pure wish fulfillment, but Hughes made it more than a comedy. It was also a meditation on youth, freedom, and the fleeting nature of high school life. Matthew Broderick's Ferris became an icon, and his direct-to-camera monologues are still quoted to this day. Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. That line alone captures Hughes's philosophy, finding beauty in the everyday chaos of growing up. But Hughes didn't stop with teen stories. He began exploring different angles of American life. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles in 1987 showed his talent for adult comedy and heartfelt emotion, pairing Steve Martin and John Candy in a holiday classic that blended frustration, laughter, and unexpected friendship. And then there was Uncle Buck in 1989, another hit that showed Hughes's love for quirky but lovable outsiders. These films proved he wasn't just a director of teen movies, he was a storyteller of human experiences. During this golden run, Hughes wasn't just making movies, he was shaping culture. His characters wore the clothes teens copied. His soundtracks, filled with new wave and alternative hits, turned into instant classics. His dialogue captured the way teens actually spoke, not how adults imagined they did. For a few years in the mid-80s, it felt like John Hughes owned Hollywood. If you were young, you saw yourself in his films. If you were older, his stories reminded you of your youth. Hughes had cracked the code.
While John Hughes' movies looked effortless on screen, the reality behind the scenes was more complicated. Hughes was a perfectionist, and his process often pushed both actors and studios to their limits. He was known for writing incredibly fast. Entire scripts would pour out of him in days, sometimes even in a single weekend. Ferris Bueller's Day Off? He wrote it in less than a week. But his speed didn't mean the work was sloppy.
His stories were tight, his characters well drawn, and his dialogue razor sharp. On set, Hughes had a reputation for being both inspiring and difficult. He gave young actors freedom, encouraging improvisation that often led to iconic moments. For example, much of the banter in The Breakfast Club wasn't rigidly scripted. Hughes trusted his cast to bring out their characters' voices. That's why the film feels so real, almost like you're eavesdropping on a real Saturday detention. But Hughes also had a controlling side. When things didn't go his way, he could shut people out completely. Some actors like Molly Ringwald and Anthony Michael Hall eventually distanced themselves from him after creative disagreements. Ringwald later admitted that she felt Hughes struggled when his actors began to outgrow their teen roles. He wanted to keep them frozen in time as his idealized characters. There were also tensions with studios. Hughes resisted interference and hated Hollywood bureaucracy. He wanted creative control, and when executives tried to meddle with his vision, he pushed back hard. Sometimes that meant walking away from projects entirely. Despite the friction, Hughes's sets often felt like safe spaces for young performers. He understood the insecurities of teenagers because he never really let go of his own. Many who worked with him said he had the soul of a teenager trapped in an adult's body. Funny, sensitive, a little rebellious, and deeply empathetic. Still, the pressure of being Hollywood's go-to teen storyteller began to weigh on him. By the late 80s, Hughes was both at the peak of his powers and quietly burning out. He had become the man with the golden touch, but even golden touches come with a cost. At the height of his fame, John Hughes shocked Hollywood by disappearing almost overnight. One moment, he was the king of teen movies, the writer and director whose name guaranteed box office gold. The next, he was gone, retreating into near total silence. So, what happened? Some say Hughes grew frustrated with the Hollywood system. He hated studio meddling, the endless rewrites, the pressure to keep delivering hit after hit. By the late 80s, Hughes was burned out. His creativity was still there, but the joy was fading. For a man who thrived on passion and spontaneity, Hollywood had become a machine, and Hughes never wanted to be part of a machine. Others point to his personal life. Hughes was intensely private. As his two sons grew older, he wanted to spend more time with his family, away from the constant spotlight. He moved back to the Midwest, choosing Chicago suburbs over Beverly Hills. Friends say he simply wanted to live like a normal person again, not as the industry's most watched storyteller. There's also the question of timing. By the 1990s, the teen movie landscape had changed. Audiences were shifting toward darker, edgier stories, think Reality Bites, Scream, and later American Pie. Hughes's heartfelt, wholesome brand of storytelling no longer dominated the box office. Hollywood was moving forward, and Hughes, rather than adapt, chose to walk away. But walking away didn't mean he stopped writing. Behind the scenes, Hughes kept busy under pseudonyms. Most people don't know this, but he wrote Home Alone, one of the biggest family hits of all time, and its sequel. He also had a hand in Beethoven, 101 Dalmatians, 1996, and several other scripts credited under the pen name Edmond Dantes, borrowed from the Count of Monte Cristo. Still, even with these successes, Hughes refused interviews, declined public appearances, and avoided Hollywood events. To many, he became a ghost, a legendary figure living quietly in Chicago, spotted only occasionally walking down the street or grabbing a cup of coffee. His absence made him even more mysterious, and fans wondered, why would a man who defined a generation of movies suddenly turn his back on it all? Some former collaborators felt hurt, saying Hughes cut off contact with them completely. Anthony Michael Hall once revealed that Hughes never returned his calls after their falling out. It was as if Hughes wanted to erase his Hollywood past, locking that chapter of his life away forever. And yet, even in his retreat, Hughes's influence refused to fade. His movies kept airing on TV, introducing new generations to Ferris Bueller, Samantha Baker, and the Shermer High School kids. His name continued to inspire reverence. The less he gave, the more people wanted to know. John Hughes didn't just leave Hollywood. He vanished from it, deliberately, almost defiantly. And that mystery still fascinates audiences today.
Even though John Hughes spent the last 2 decades of his life away from Hollywood, his fingerprints never left American culture.
His movies continue to inspire not just filmmakers, but entire generations of viewers who grew up quoting his lines and living by his lessons. Think about it. Every holiday season, millions still watch Home Alone. Every February, teenagers discover 16 Candles and Pretty in Pink. Every spring, high schoolers stumble upon The Breakfast Club, and it feels as fresh as it did in 1985. Hughes managed to create stories that didn't just reflect the 80s, they transcended them. Filmmakers often call Hughes a bridge between genres. He proved that teen movies didn't have to be shallow or formulaic. They could have depth, humor, heartbreak, and real characters. Without Hughes, you don't get Clueless, Mean Girls, 10 Things I Hate About You, or even shows like Euphoria. His DNA is baked into all of them. But Hughes's legacy isn't only cinematic. His movies gave teenagers permission to be vulnerable. They showed that it was okay to feel misunderstood, to wrestle with identity, to fall in love awkwardly, or to rebel against authority. For millions of kids who felt invisible, Hughes's movie said, "I see you." In his final years, John Hughes lived quietly in Illinois, spending time with his wife Nancy and their 2 sons. He stayed out of the spotlight, rarely giving interviews. Those who knew him say he was still writing, jotting down ideas, sketches, stories, but he no longer cared about the fame or the industry. For Hughes, storytelling was personal, not performative. Then, in August 2009, tragedy struck. While visiting family in New York, John Hughes suffered a sudden heart attack. He was only 59 years old. News of his death sent shockwaves through Hollywood and around the world. Fans mourned, fellow filmmakers paid tribute, and his actors, now grown adults with careers of their own, remembered him as the man who gave them their first voices. At his funeral, many of the Brat Pack actors reunited, honoring the man who had once defined their youth. It was a reminder of how deeply Hughes had touched their lives, and through them, the lives of millions of fans. Today, John Hughes is remembered as more than just a director or writer. He is a cultural architect. His films live on, constantly rediscovered by new generations. And while he left Hollywood far too soon, his work continues to play in living rooms, classrooms, and late-night movie marathons, ensuring that his spirit never really left us. John Hughes once said, "Teenagers still feel that they are alone, and the movies remind them that they are not." In that sense, his movies are still talking to us, still comforting, still inspiring, still making us laugh and cry decades later. The king of teen movies may have walked away from Hollywood, but his legacy remains immortal. Because somewhere out there, another teenager is pressing play on The Breakfast Club and feeling, perhaps for the first time, that they finally belong.